in the remote English countryside, where the winds of the River Severn hiss like whispering souls, a hidden history festers beneath sacred soil. This is the story of a saint whose name the Church tried to erase. A virgin martyr, a forbidden shrine, and a ghost with no hands. This is the case of Saint Arilda and the bloody legend of Oldbury on Severn. Her story is not one of triumph or veneration, but of shadows, silence, and a lingering curse that clings to the river's edge. What secrets did the Church bury with her? And why does her name still stir fear in those who dare to speak it? The name Arilda appears only in scattered medieval texts, local martyrologies, the writings of one 14th century monk named Brother Elric of Tewkesbury, and a few weathered parish records in Gloucestershire. She is not canonized by Rome, no papal bull, no relics in gilded shrines. Her existence is a whisper, a footnote in ecclesiastical records, yet in the village of Oldbury on Severn. The locals once feared her like they feared hell itself. Arilda was said to be a virgin martyr, slaughtered in the late 5th or early 6th century, defending her purity from a pagan assailant. The earliest record, a fragmented manuscript from Glastonbury Abbey, claims, "She was rent apart and her hands taken, that no earthly thing be left of her beauty." This act of mutilation was not random. In early Christian iconography, the hand represents sacramental power, the ability to bless, to heal, to command spirits. To sever a saint's hands was to erase her spiritual authority, to strip her of divine connection. But why such a specific and brutal act? Why just the hands? Local oral traditions suggest Arilda was more than a simple martyr. Some claimed she performed miracles in life, healing the sick with a touch, calming storms with a raised palm. Her hands were said to glow faintly when she prayed, a sign of divine favor. Yet after her death, her name was shunned. The Church in Rome never acknowledged her, and local bishops were instructed to omit her from litanies. Villagers whispered that her severed hands were buried beneath the churchyard in Oldbury, hidden to prevent her power from resurfacing. Others said her spirit lingered, restless, seeking what was stolen from her. Arilda's story was kept alive not by priests, but by women, midwives, healers, and mothers who passed her name down in secret. They told of a young woman who defied a world of violence with quiet strength, only to be betrayed by those meant to protect her. But even in these tales there is fear. The women warned their daughters never to speak Arilda's name aloud near the river, lest they summon something they could not control. At the edge of Oldbury on Severn, a stone-lined spring known as Arilda's Well sits half forgotten, overgrown with moss and thorns. Its waters were once said to run red after heavy rains, a phenomenon locals attributed to Arilda's blood, still pouring from the wounds inflicted over 900 years ago. A 17th century antiquarian named John Aubrey visited the site in 1668 and noted in his journal, "The waters spring red as wine, and the local priest forbids the children from speaking her name." Before the Norman conquest of 1066, Saxon farmers built a small oratory near the well, a simple stone structure dedicated to Arilda. Pilgrims came from across Gloucestershire, drawn by stories of miracles. Women drank the water in hopes of fertility, believing it carried Arilda's blessing. Wounded soldiers washed their hands and swore their injuries healed overnight. The well became a place of reverence, a shrine to a martyr whose story resonated with the marginalized, those the Church often ignored. But the veneration came to a sudden halt in the winter of 1087. 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, all under 10, vanished from the chapel after a night of heavy snow. A search party scoured the village and the riverbanks. Days later, the 2 girls were found in a nearby wood, their bodies cold and lifeless, their hands severed at the wrists. The boy was never found. Carved into the chapel door in crude Latin was a message: "She weeps for the touch of the innocent." The village turned on the well. The oratory was abandoned, its stones left to crumble. By the 12th century, the Church declared the site cursed, forbidding its use for worship. Yet some villagers continued to visit in secret, leaving offerings of flowers, small woven crosses, and carved wooden hands, hoping to appease the spirit they believed lingered. These clandestine pilgrimages continued for centuries, despite warnings from priests who claimed the well was a gateway to something unholy. Geological surveys in the 20th century revealed high iron content in the well's water, explaining the red hue after rains. But this scientific explanation did little to quell the unease. Elders spoke of nights when the water bubbled without rain, or when the air around the well grew heavy, as if something were watching. Even today, the path to the well is unmarked, and those who know its location rarely speak of it. The Historia Minor Ecclesiae Westensis, a little-known chronicle from the 13th century, offers the most detailed account of Arilda's life and death. It describes her as an anchorite, a woman who withdrew from the world to live in solitude and prayer, near the River Severn. She was young, perhaps no older than 20, and known for her piety and defiance. A local lord named Mawson of the Forest, a man of pagan leanings in a newly Christianized region, sought her hand in marriage. Arilda refused, choosing instead to dedicate her life to God. Enraged, Mawson pursued her. The chronicle recounts that Arilda fled to a cave near the river, a hidden refuge where she fasted and prayed. One night Mawson and his men found her. She was dragged from the cave and brought to the river's edge. There, her hands were severed with iron blades, in punishment meant to humiliate as much as to kill. Her body, according to some accounts, was thrown into the River Severn, its currents carrying her away. No grave was ever marked, no burial rites performed. The aftermath is shrouded in suspicion. The area's priests, loyal to the newly established Norman church, refused to honor Arilda. Her name was scrubbed from diocesan rolls, her story suppressed. Mawson, however, prospered. His lands were blessed by the church, his tithes halved, his sons ordained as clergy. Some speculate he paid for the church's silence, offering wealth or influence to erase Arilda's story. Others believe the church feared her growing cult, a threat to their authority in a region still steeped in pagan traditions. The cave where Arilda hid was sealed, its entrance lost to time. Locals claim the river near it never freezes, even in the harshest winters, as if warmed by an unseen presence. In the 15th century, a monk reported finding a stone near the riverbank inscribed with the words, "Manum meum," Latin for my hand. The stone vanished from the monastery shortly after, and the monk was disciplined for heresy. Arilda's story raises uncomfortable questions. Was she a victim of a power struggle between the early Christian church and lingering pagan beliefs? Did Mawson act alone, or was he a tool of a larger effort to suppress a woman whose influence threatened the church's control? The silence surrounding her death suggests a deliberate attempt to erase her from history, yet her presence persists in the land and its stories. For centuries, shepherds, fishermen, and travellers along the River Severn reported sightings of a woman in white robes, debasing the riverbank at dawn. She is always described the same way, pale, crying softly, her sleeves soaked in blood, trailing from the elbows, repeating the phrase, "You let it happen." Some claim she appeared during storms, her figure illuminated by lightning, her voice carried by the wind. Others said she stood silently, staring at those who ventured too close to the water. In 1712, a bishop's clerk named Thomas Ward was sent to Oldbury to investigate rumors of a heretical cult worshipping Arilda as a handless Madonna. He found a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of the old chapel, accessible only through a narrow tunnel. Inside were 6 stone figures, women, all with their hands broken off. In the center stood a crude statue of a crowned woman, her arms ending in jagged stumps stained red with what Ward described as old blood or ochre. The air in the chamber was thick, the walls damp with an unexplainable moisture. Ward's report to the bishop urged the chamber's destruction. The bishop ordered it sealed, and workers poured molten lead into the tunnel's entrance to ensure it remained closed. Within 2 years, Oldbury suffered a devastating illness that killed nearly a third of the village. The local priest, Father Edmund Cole, hanged himself in the bell tower, leaving a note that read only, "She sees me." No official record survives of what happened to the chamber or its contents. Some claim the church walled it off and placed a mass grave inside to consecrate the ground. Others say the statues were smashed and thrown into the River Severn, though fishermen reported finding stone fragments with carved fingers along the banks for decades after. In the 19th century, a farmer digging near Arilda's well uncovered a small bone, believed to be a human finger. He reburied it immediately, claiming he heard a woman's voice whispering his name that night. The incident spread through the village, reigniting fears of Arilda's restless spirit. By this time, the well was avoided entirely, and children were taught to steer clear of the river at dawn. The ghost stories persisted into the 20th century. In 1954, a schoolteacher claimed to have seen a woman in white standing in the mist near the well, her arms raised as if in supplication. The teacher fled, but later found her hands inexplicably bruised, as if gripped tightly. Such accounts, though dismissed as folklore, kept Arilda's legend alive, a haunting reminder of a past the church could not fully erase. In 1983, two paranormal investigators, Dr. Leslie Rames and Arthur Morley, camped near Arilda's well as part of a study on Gloucestershire's haunted sites. Using early audio equipment, they recorded unexplained phenomena, whispering in Latin, a child's cry, and a woman shouting, "I told you not to touch them!" The recordings were submitted to the BBC for a planned documentary, but the tapes were deemed too disturbing and never aired. Dr. Rames later published a short paper titled 7 Hauntings and Sacred Repression, arguing that Arilda's story was a case of ecclesiastical suppression of female and spiritual power. Weeks after the paper's release, Rames was institutionalized, claiming she had no hands in her dreams and woke to find her fingers broken. Morley refused to speak of the investigation and moved away from Oldbury shortly after. In 2001, a group of teenagers broke into the chained-off area around Arilda's well, ignoring warnings from locals. They reported seeing a figure in white standing in the water, her arms raised, blood dripping from her sleeves. One of the group, a 17-year-old boy named Daniel Carter, went missing for 3 days. When found wandering the riverbank, he was incoherent, his hands covered in cuts that wouldn't heal for months. He refused to discuss what happened, but his family moved away soon after. In 2015, a local historian attempted to petition the council for an excavation of the well and the chapel ruins. The request was denied, citing geological instability and heritage preservation concerns. Yet, the historian noted that no geological surveys had been conducted in decades, and the council's response seemed unusually abrupt. Rumors persist that the church still exerts influence over the site, ensuring it remains untouched. Today, Arilda's well is locked behind rusted chains and nailed boards. No signs mark its location, and the path is overgrown. Locals avoid it, and visitors are gently discouraged from asking questions. The riverbank nearby is eerily quiet, with no birdsong or animal tracks, even in spring. Elders in Oldbury speak of the well in hushed tones, warning that to linger there at dawn is to invite misfortune. Arilda's story raises profound questions about the early Christian church's relationship with women and power. In the 5th and 6th centuries, as Christianity spread through Britain, it often absorbed or suppressed local pagan traditions. Was Arilda a historical figure, a Christian martyr whose story was erased to consolidate ecclesiastical authority? Or was she a pagan figure, perhaps a priestess or deity, reframed as a saint to ease the transition to Christianity? The severing of her hands suggests a symbolic act. In many pre-Christian traditions, hands were seen as conduits of divine energy, used in rituals to invoke gods or heal the sick. By removing Arilda's hands, her killers, whether Morsin or the church, may have sought to sever her connection to this power. Yet, the persistence of her legend suggests they failed. Her story, though suppressed, lived on in the margins, carried by those who refused to forget. The church's silence is telling. Why was Arilda never canonized, despite her apparent miracles? Why were her followers branded heretics? Some scholars argue she represented a threat to the patriarchal structure of the early church, a woman whose influence rivaled that of male clergy. Others see her as a victim of a broader campaign to erase local saints who didn't fit Rome's narrative. Theological parallels exist in other traditions. The handless maiden archetype appears in folklore across Europe, often tied to stories of sacrifice and redemption. Arilda's handless Madonna cult, as described in 1712, suggests a syncretic blend of Christian and pagan beliefs, where she was revered as both a saint and a goddess-like figure. The Church's violent reaction, sealing the chamber, suppressing her name, speaks to a fear of this hybrid spirituality. What was Arilda? A regional martyr, murdered for her faith. A pagan deity absorbed and then erased by a conquering church. A fabricated legend crafted to keep children away from cursed ground. Or something else entirely. A spirit born of the land itself, neither saint nor demon, but a force that refuses to be silenced. The Church doesn't speak her name anymore. But in Oldbury-on-Severn, the elders know. Ask them where Arilda's well is, and watch their faces change. Ask them why it's kept behind rusted chains and nailed boards, why no flowers grow near it, why the river sometimes runs red. They may not answer, but their silence will tell you enough. If you visit the River Severn at dawn, stand at the water's edge and say her name. Listen carefully. You might hear fingers dragging through the mud, or a voice whispering, "You let it happen." And if you feel a cold touch on your hand, don't look down.